Your methods are outdated, he said, eyes skimming past me to the diploma on the wall that wasn't his. We need modern approaches. My name is Martin Hale, 58. Until 10 minutes ago, Senior Systems Administrator at Street Brigid Medical Center in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. 15 years keeping the digital heartbeat steady in a 300-bed hospital. 15 years erased by a 20-minute meeting. Gavin Blake sat behind what used to be Dr. Harrow's desk, the old wood too warm for his cold posture. 42, MBA polish, no medical spine. 4 months in and already swinging an axe, he called a plan. By the window, his consultant, Devin Pike, held his phone like a mirror, the screen brighter than any human face in the room. His thumbs kept moving. Maybe a message to a team, maybe a note to himself that my chair would soon be his. The consulting team will oversee the transition to cloud-based architecture, Gavin continued. We've prepared a severance package. 2 months' salary. Standard NDA. His voice was even. Trained even. I nodded because there wasn't room for anything else. My ID badge felt heavy at my collarbone, a small anchor with a picture of my younger face. 15 years without a crash on my watch. Not during the ransomware scare of 2018. Not in the 2020 grid failure when the building went quiet and our generators were the only pulse. Not through the lean years when I lost half my staff and loaned the rest my weekends. I had patched what vendors ignored. I had stitched old systems to new ones so nurses could chart, so surgeons could schedule, so pharmacy orders would appear where and when they should. It wasn't pretty. It was dependable. The security team will escort you, Gavin said, sliding a folder toward me. We'll need your access card and credentials. I unclipped the badge and set it down like a coin paid to a river. The master passwords are in the secure drive, I said. Fully documented. He smiled, first time that hour. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Martin. Change is hard, but necessary. Devin stepped forward, already measuring the curve of the chair with his eyes. He had spent 3 weeks auditing my world without asking a single question about how it survived. There was so much I could have told him: the custom patches, the odd handshake between the legacy pharmacy and patient records, the backup rituals that only worked because they were done by hand, at dawn, but I didn't. He hadn't asked. Anything else? Gavin said. I shook my head. Nothing else. We walked past people who knew the sound of my footsteps at 3 a.m., past the surgical desk where I had rebuilt a corrupted calendar while the city slept, past a decade and a half of quiet, unphotographed work. In the parking lot, I placed a small box on the passenger seat, family photos, a cracked mug, a screwdriver I trusted more than luck. I didn't look back. They didn't want my expertise. They wanted my absence. In a week, the absence would have a shape. In a week, they would trace its edges with shaking hands. But for now, the truck started, and I drove. The hospital shrank in the mirror like a secret I'd kept too well. I came to the hospital late, the way some people arrive to faith after losing what they thought would last forever. 50 was supposed to be my victory lap in private tech. Then the economy folded in on itself, and Catherine's oncologist began saying the word protocol like a prayer. We needed stability, insurance that didn't tremble, a reason to get up that wasn't fear. Street. Brigid offered all three. I put on a badge and started over. I didn't speak the language at first. Acronyms clanged in the halls like dropped instruments: CPOE, PAX, HL7. I learned them the way you learn a new city, by getting lost at night and finding your way by smell and light. Doctor. Alan Harrow, our director then, walked beside me on those first rounds. He had the soft patience of someone who had watched machinery and men fail and still believed in both. Fancy dashboards don't save lives, Martin, he told me once, leaning on the cardiology counter. Reliability does. It wasn't a slogan. It was a rule of care, like washing hands. So I built toward certainty. Redundant backups. Manual overrides where the vendors said automation was industry standard. A pharmacy interface that shook hands with the patient record, even when the vendors refused to speak to each other. It looked inelegant from the sky. Up close, it was a bridge over a river in flood. I loved Catherine through chemo and clinical trials. Loved her when she shaved her head before the hair could choose to leave. On infusion days, I worked remote from a plastic chair, scripting around a database engine that didn't know how to forgive. She joked that I kept 2 heartbeats alive, hers and the hospital's. When the cancer took her 8 years ago, I stayed. Grief makes a person need a job that needs them back. The hospital filled in the edges she left. Nurse Mariah Jacobs, who learned the scent of burnt coffee meant a patch was nearly done, and set a fresh cup by my keyboard without a word. Doctor Neil Patel, who brought donuts after critical nights, and wrote thank you notes in block letters like a resident still trying to be taken seriously. Louise Chen, night custodian with a radio on low, who walked laps during maintenance windows and told me stories about the city before the Riverwalk was pretty. People like that don't appear in org charts. They hold the place together anyway. We made the uptime numbers sing. Not one crash on my watch. We passed audits the way saints pass temptations, steadily, without fanfare. I missed a vacation or 3. Missed Megan's college graduation and watched from a grainy live stream, applauding alone in the server room while a cluster failover completed. I told myself we save lives in the margins, that someone's mother would get her meds on time because I stayed. When Dr. Harrow retired last winter, the room lost its ballast. In walked Gavin Blake, with efficiency slides that sparkled like new snow. Pretty, cold. He spoke of alignment and modernization, and the air in the server room shifted, like a pressure front before weather. The audit arrived like a traveling show. New logos, fresh jargon, Devin Pike and his consultants in matching polos, lanyards swinging like metronomes. Digital transformation, they said, cloud first. System modernization, words that sparkle in brochures and smudge in hallways. They covered a whiteboard with arrows and boxes, a city map drawn by tourists who never leave Main Street. From my chair, I could see what was missing: the alleys where we rerouted traffic during outages, the footbridges we built when vendors refused to pave a road. They scheduled listening sessions. They listened for answers that matched their slides. When mine didn't, they smiled the way you smile at an elder who tells a true story at the wrong time. I talked about interfaces that made 17 platforms behave like one. About the weird handshake between pharmacy and records. The handshake you only learn by breaking it once and limping away wiser. About compliance that lives not in binders but in habits, the way Mariah double-checks patient IDs when the wristband printers stutter. Their pens stayed still. I sent emails at careful intervals. Subject lines that carried their language. Risk surface summary. Interoperability constraints. Auth chain renewal cadence. Each note had receipts, logs, diagrams, timestamps. Polite thank yous came back like out-of-office replies. No questions, no follow-ups. In meetings, Gavin checked his watch the way some people check a wound for bleeding. We've handled dozens of hospital migrations, Devin would add, turning the word dozens into a shield. It's all standard stuff. Nothing in a hospital is standard. Not the way pain shows up. Not the way systems fail. One Friday, I returned from the server room and found contractors in my office, measuring the distance from the window to the door. Just planning renovations, one said, eyes dropping as if the carpet could absolve him. I nodded. I have been a contractor. I know the dance of doing a job and pretending it isn't a person. That night I opened my resume, a document I hadn't touched since Catherine died. I wrote about uptime and audits, about resilience and recovery points. I forgot to mention the human parts, the calls at 3-4 a.m., when I breathe with a nurse until the screen returns, the way I keep a spare barcode scanner in my trunk because delivery trucks miss their routes in winter. No recruiter asks for those. They are not bullet points. They are ballast. I kept showing up, kept patching at dawn so clinics wouldn't notice the seam, kept leaving notes where a stranger might look, as if I could leave a trail through a forest I knew they would insist was a parking lot. Part of me believed no one would cut loose the person who could recite the system's old injuries. The other part heard an engine idling in the distance, the sound of a decision already made. The audit ended with a slide that looked like a sunrise. Day 1, it said. New colors, new names, no map of the ground we still stood on. I closed my laptop and felt the table shiver under my hands, a vibration only I seemed to notice. Weather was coming. Silence has its own temperature. It's cooler than anger, steadier than grief. The first morning after the meeting, my phone began to flicker with names I knew by ringtone. Alan from IT. What's the backup cadence for surgical scheduling again? Denise the DBA. Where do the pharmacy interface configs live? I'm not finding the last patch notes. A night charge nurse I didn't recognize by number. Scanner down in triage. Workaround? I read them like postcards from a town I had moved away from without changing my mailing address. The NDA sat in my mind like a traffic sign. Do not enter. I set the phone face down on the table and listened to the clock. You can document a bridge and still not know its creek. Our systems were a living thing, a prairie ecosystem holding together against wind vendor oddities nested inside regulatory hedges, workflows shaped by clinicians' hands. I had written hundreds of pages, topology, failover recipes, security rituals timed to the stubbornness of certain services. But knowledge in a hospital is more than text. It's muscle memory. The trick of restarting a print server in oncology without waking radiology. The 2-minute window at dawn when renewing auth chains won't trip the lab analyzers. Those aren't procedures. They're weather patterns you learn by standing outside. Voicemails followed. Gavin first, formal. Minor integration issues with pharmacy. Quick question. Then, less polished. Call me as soon as you can. By evening, the varnish had worn through. This is urgent, Martin. I let each message bloom and fade. The NDA wasn't the only reason. There's an ethics to absence. You don't run back into a burning building to retrieve the person who lit the match. At dusk, Dr. Patel called from his personal phone. No preamble. Trauma case at 4. ER couldn't pull history. We called previous hospitals. 40 minutes to confirm allergies. His breath carried fluorescent fatigue. No one died, he said, like a benediction that still stung. But they're talking about paper protocols. I could see the forms, triplicate, carbon stains ghosting through pages. We teach residents that paper is noble in crisis, but it is slow. It forgets legibility. It asks nurses to be both hands and scribe. After we hung up, the house felt enormous. My daughter's framed photo, Catherine's shawl on the chair back, a slope of absent shoulders. I made coffee I didn't need, and watched the steam lose arguments with air. I thought about the culture of work that praises fireworks and overlooks the electrician. About how a quiet uptime percentage, 99.98, feels like background noise until it drops by a tenth and every hallway hears the silence. More texts arrived, more voicemails. I answered none. Clarity came like the river in winter, slow, unavoidable, honest. For 15 years I had made problems disappear. Now, the disappearing had a shape, and it wasn't mine to fix. On Sunday, I opened the desk drawer where I keep the future. A rubber-banded stack of business cards. One sat on top like it had been waiting for air. Jennifer Ward, Chief Technology at Riverside Meridian Medical Center. She had called every couple of years, asking if I was ready to move someplace that treated stability like strategy. I always said not yet. Catherine was sick, then gone. Megan was finishing school. The river of my life was tied to Street Bridget's banks. Now, the line had been cut. I dialed. Jennifer's voice was brisk and kind, the way people sound when they're good at telling hard truths. Martin, she said, I heard a rumor you might be available. We talked for an hour about what matters and what only looks like it does. She didn't sell me a vision. She asked about my stubborn habits document first, patch second, never cut over on a Friday, except that printers defy theology. She spoke about Riverside's culture, slow yeses, guardrails. The word safety used for both patients and staff. We agreed on a start date. The relief was quiet, like a fever breaking in the night. Monday morning, my inbox became a siren. 17 emails from Gavin in 12 hours, subject lines stepping down the staircase from polite to pleading. Quick question re. Patient DB. Urgent cardiology interface. Critical need assistance now. I read each one like a weather report for a place I no longer lived. I answered none. The NDA was a wall. My conscience was another. You can't be the ghost that fixes what your absence is meant to teach. At 3:12 p.m., a final email. Name your consultant rate. We'll pay it. I was drafting a courteous decline when the doorbell rang. Gavin stood on my porch with his tie loosened and a smile that believed in itself only halfway. Up close, he looked younger and older at once. Success rubbed thin by sleepless nights. I let him in. Coffee, because I am not unkind. We've hit some unexpected complications, he began. fingers tight on the mug. Devon's team is working around the clock, but some of your customizations are proving challenging. The word customizations wobbled, as if it might spill into admissions of miscalculation. He detailed outages like a confession, oncology's protocols missing for 6 hours, billing blind for a day, compliance alarms waking like dogs. I documented everything, I said. Yes. He took a breath. But documentation doesn't translate. He put the offer on the table. 6 months, double my salary. A badge without permanence. Come back and teach them the creaks of the bridge you built. I've accepted another role, I said. Riverside. He blinked. They're our competitor. I know. He reached for leverage and came up with threat. Your severance includes a non-compete. It doesn't. I met his eyes. My lawyer checked. NDA, yes. Non-compete, no. That was unmasked. He stared at the steam from his cup as if it might spell a way out. This isn't about revenge. It's about value, I said, and patient care, which you're invoking now but discounted when you rushed the plan. I walked him to the door. On the step, he tried one more argument. We need you. You needed to listen, I said. The door closed softly. Some endings don't slam. By Thursday, the story had a microphone. The local station set up across from the ambulance bay, wind tugging at the reporter's hair while she said the words I'd always tried to keep off screen. System failures. Patient care impacted. Paper protocols. I watched from my living room, coffee cooling, the crawl of headlines moving like a slow bruise along the bottom of the screen. A neighbor texted, "Isn't that your hospital?" I typed and deleted 3 answers, then settled on, "Used to be." Not 10 minutes later, Jennifer Ward called. Her voice carried the cadence of someone balancing empathy with logistics. "You okay?" she asked. I said I was. I wasn't sure which part of me believed it. "I just spoke with someone from your board, Dr. Eleanor Hughes. She wanted to confirm you've accepted our offer." A pause. "She also told me some things you should hear." I braced. "The way you do before a scan result." "Go on." "Helix Systems." The name landed with a metallic taste. Blake's been courting them for months, promised cost savings and a shared services model. The pitch came with a performance bonus if the board adopted his plan quickly. Jennifer's voice softened. "Eleanor says they weren't given the full technical implications, compatibility gaps with pharmacy and radiology, the retrofit risks." My mouth went dry. So this wasn't modernization. It was a lock-in. Eleanor used the word misled. The state compliance office is asking questions. ER diversions. Critical units on manual. She asked if you'd consider briefing the board. No obligation. Reticence. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet that isn't empty so much as crowded with unsaid things. Cities know this pattern. A developer shows glossy renderings, promises activation and new life, and forgets the corner store that cashes paychecks and knows everyone's name. Healthcare is a city with sicker streets. You can't bulldoze the map and call it progress. An email arrived from Dr. Hughes while the sun failed behind the cottonwoods. Subject line, invitation and apology. She wrote like a surgeon, precise, spare, brave. The board had approved Blake's restructuring on incomplete and misleading information. The systems I kept had exceeded benchmarks for reliability and security. The comparison slides were salted with false equivalences. She asked me to speak the next morning at an emergency session. "We owe you the chance to be heard," she wrote. "We owe the hospital the truth." Anger tried to rise and found no handholds. What I felt instead was a tired gratitude for plain language, for a door opening toward repair. I thought of Mariah checking bracelets by lamplight, of Neil with his donuts and weary jokes, of Louise humming down a night corridor. People who should never have to wonder whether a screen will wake. I typed a reply and kept it simple. "I'll be there. I'll bring what you need to see." When I hit send, the room felt level again, like a floor settling after a storm. This wasn't a chance to rewrite history. It was a chance to stop the next bad sentence from being written. I arrived 15 minutes early because that's how I've always met risk, by leaving a cushion for what I can't predict. The boardroom smelled faintly of coffee and carpet glue. Dr. Eleanor Hughes greeted me with a small nod that said thank you without asking for forgiveness in return. Department heads streamed in. Faces I knew in the way you know a city's streets by light, by traffic, by where they flood when it rains. Gavin Blake came last, Devon Pike half a step behind him, both of them thinner than their presentations. Gavin paused when he saw me at the table. He recovered quickly, the way a man steadies a stack that's already tilting. Doctor. Hughes opened the meeting with language that did not hide. We're here to account for harm and to decide a path. Then she turned to me. Mr. Hale, please. I connected my laptop. The screen filled with what I've trusted more than eloquence. Diagrams, logs, timestamps. These systems were built to fit the hands that use them, I said. Every interface answered a real problem. Nothing ornamental, nothing for show. I clicked through the maps, pointing out the places where pharmacy and records held each other steady, where radiology kept its own rhythm for reasons that had to do with patience and physics, not procurement. The documentation you need is here, I continued. What isn't here is tacit knowledge. You cannot print a habit. You cannot bulk import a creek. I moved to a comparison I wrote at my kitchen table last night. The house quiet enough to hear the HVAC sigh. Helix thrives in Greenfield, builds new hospitals lifted onto their rails. Retrofitting into established ecosystems like street bridges is slower, riskier. Their own specs admit friction with our pharmacy and imaging stacks. I highlighted the lines. I let the room sit with them. Gavin spoke then. Careful, even. Compatibility issues are temporary. Helix has done dozens of successful transitions. I nodded. True. But not here. Not now. I pulled up an email thread. I'd been sent by a manager who couldn't sleep. Language suggesting emphasize vulnerabilities, de-emphasize uptime, prepare the case for accelerated change. I didn't look at Gavin when I read the phrases. The room did. Dr. Patel cleared his throat. His voice carried the shape of the week. We diverted 67 ER patients, delayed 3 surgeries, medication administration errors up 12%. The numbers were simple. They did not persuade. They testified. Silence followed, not the brittle kind, but the kind where people finally hear their own decisions. Dr. Hughes asked a short set of questions. No one argued with the answers. The vote took less time than a failover. Helix contract terminated. Emergency restoration approved. A return to systems that worked, with a plan to learn rather than erase. I closed the laptop and felt an old tension ease between my shoulders. Not triumph. Something humbler. The sense of a bridge being inspected before more trucks cross. Dr. Hughes touched my sleeve. We'll need leadership for the rebuild, she said. Will you stay and guide us? I looked at the door where Gavin stood, smaller than the title behind him. Yes, I said, if we do it the careful way. The careful way begins with listening. Begins with maps that include the alleys. Begins with admitting that progress is not a synonym for speed. The first night back, I didn't sit in my old chair. I stood. You steady a room with posture before you steady it with plans. We turned the conference space into a war room that wasn't about war, just triage, patience, and lists. Whiteboards bloomed. Restore, reconcile, relearn. I built the team like a bridge, old cables and new steel. Alan from IT, Denise the DBA, 2 residents from biomedical engineering who asked good questions and waited for answers, a contract specialist who spoke fluent pharmacy. We rotated shifts like ICU nurses, so no one got heroic and careless. Helix had left fingerprints everywhere, registry edits that made sense in their universe, services renamed, a migration script that handled dates like they weren't attached to lives. In radiology, metadata tags misaligned by milliseconds had turned into missing studies. In pharmacy, an ETL job dropped leading zeros in drug codes, so an infusion pump saw a sibling medication where it needed a twin. None of it was malicious. It was indifferent, which is another kind of danger. We started with the beating organs, identity, orders, results. Dual-run cutovers, new beside old, so the line never went flat. We restored from snapshots, and then walked the tables like a farmer walks a field after hail, touching leaves, naming damage. Denise found a way to reconcile orphaned medication orders using a checksum I'd written years ago and forgotten. I wrote a script to remap timestamps against a master clock. 2 seconds of drift can make a surgeon doubt a status screen. We held briefings at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., shift change rhythm, and ended each with one rule. If it feels fast, slow down. Clinicians came and went between rounds. Mariah set a tray of plastic cups and labeled them with dry erase DBA. NetOps. App's quiet humor that kept the air from breaking. Dr. Patel sat with us and translated stress into facts. Cath lab Q normalized, he'd report, tapping the board. In the hall, I saw a resident filing paper notes into a box marked temporary. I wrote temporary again, underlined twice, and meant it. By the middle of week 2, the graph began to lift. Response times slid back into their lanes. PACS stoplights turned green. A night nurse from oncology emailed me at 04:11. Orders show up before I finish my sip of coffee. The little metrics matter because they add up to breathing. There's a theology to uptime. It's not triumph, it's care. I sent one last note to the team before we slept. We restore to remember. Monday, we plan how not to forget. Quarterly review day. I carried my laptop like a modest tray, no fireworks, only bread and water. The boardroom was brighter than I remembered. Morning sun glancing off the framed mission statement that had watched 100 promises come and go. Dr. Hughes nodded me to the seat at the long table. Not the corner, not the folding chair near the projector cart. A seat with a mic, a placard, and a glass of water that was refilled before I noticed it empty. I connected to the display. One dashboard, white background, black text, no gradients. Uptime, response time, order to MAR latency, PACS retrieval, claims submission success. Before Helix, during disruption, after restoration. The lines didn't boast, they told. Recovery is complete, I said. No data loss, integrity verified by cross-checks and random audits. Heads dipped. Someone exhaled. I moved to the next slide. This is what modernization looks like for us, I said. Not a sprint, a cadence. A 5-year roadmap unfolded in small, careful steps. Year 1, inventory to truth naming what actually runs, not what the contract page says runs. Replace brittle components that force weekend heroics. Build a read-only shadow of critical databases for rapid analytics that won't touch patient flow. Year 2, staged upgrades to EHR interfaces using dual-run cutovers. Standardized event logging across departments so every alarm speaks one dialect. Year 3, cloud where it fits non-clinical analytics. Disaster recovery replicas with contracts that let us leave without burning the house. Year 4, imaging archive lifecycle rules so storage breathes without starving radiology. Year 5, clinician-facing refinements chosen by clinicians, not presentations, less clicking, more seeing. I talked about guardrails, change windows that respect human bodies, a red button that lets any attending freeze a cutover if patient care blinks, a practice of tabletop drills where we rehearse failure the way fire stations run ladders on quiet afternoons. I described metrics not as trophies but as early warnings. If order to MAR slips by half a second, something underneath is hungry. Feed it before it howls. I gave them costs, honest ones. Not the teaser rates. The total cost of calm, hardware we won't apologize for, staff we won't understaff, training that pays nurses for the time we steal from their shifts. I listed the risks I could foresee and the ones I knew would arrive unnamed. Our hedge, I said, is humility, designed for rollback. Assume we'll be wrong sometimes. Make it easy to stop. Questions came like rain, steady and needed. Dr. Patel asked about downtime procedures, printed, practiced, and rewritten every quarter, I said. A trustee asked, why not go faster since the graph was green again? Because speed is a kind of debt, I answered. It compounds. The vote was a show of hands and a soft chorus of eyes. Unanimous, no speeches, just the kind of support that feels like a floor that won't give. Afterward, in the hall, Mariah caught my sleeve. Roadmap looks like sleep, she said, smiling. In the good way. I nodded. That was the point. Modernization that lets people rest. Systems that hum at body temperature. Change that remembers the patient in the bed and the nurse at the screen. We build forward without forgetting what holds. 6 months later, the evening was gold and ordinary, the kind of light that forgives everything it touches. I sat on the back deck with a mug that had survived 3 offices and 1 life change too many. The phone buzzed against the table. Jennifer Ward, Hurd Street, Bridget won the Regional Excellence Award. Congratulations, almost colleague. I laughed under my breath and typed back. Thank you. Right place, right time. She replied, right hands. The screen dimmed and left my face in the reflection, older, yes, but steadier. Inside, on the sideboard, my new badge lay where I'd dropped it after rounds. Chief Technology Officer. A phrase that still felt like a jacket I was breaking in. Cuff by cuff, I lifted it and felt the plastic give slightly under my thumb, the way real things do. Not the man who kept the lights on in the basement anymore. The man asked to speak for the lights in rooms where decisions are made. Recognition had never been the point, but invisibility drains a body. In my camera roll, a recent photo. 20 people shoulder to shoulder at a long table. My team veterans with careful eyes. Newcomers with bright ones smiling. The cautious smile of people who know tomorrow's work still waits. A brass plaque leaned against the dessert tray, engraved with the line they'd written for us. For safeguarding patient care through resilience and quiet skill. I wanted to send it to Catherine, to say, see, the hours were not lost. Then I put the phone down and let the wish be its own ceremony. I think of Gavin sometimes, the way one thinks of a storm after the shingles are replaced. Last I heard, a startup. Disruption promised, like summer rain. I don't wish him hurt. I wish him listening, the kind that slows a hand before it reaches for a lever. The kind that hears the creak of a bridge and calls it information, not nostalgia. At the hospital we move forward, but not in a straight line. We patch a little and learn a lot. We retire a piece and adopt another, always with a red button in the corner of the plan. We practice turning things off on purpose, so we'll be braver when something fails on its own. We count not just what's fast, but what's kind, how quickly orders find nurses, how often the system lets a resident finish a sentence before a screen insists on a click. Some innovations arrive like fireworks. Ours arrive like steady breathing. The lesson that pulled me through and back again is not complicated. Experience isn't the enemy of change. It's the scaffolding that lets change climb without falling. Some things shouldn't be replaced only because they are old. Some things shouldn't be kept only because they are ours. We choose by one question, written on a sticky note above my desk, in block letters I learned from Neil. Does this make care safer today? The sun slipped behind the cottonwoods. The badge caught a last piece of light and gave it back. I finished my coffee. Tomorrow would be more of the same, which, finally, was the point.